So, you want to set up an intergalactic empire, but you're not quite sure how to make it work. You're wondering, do I have some kind of elected body as well as the emperor? Or maybe I should just skip the whole empire thing and stick with a democracy. But how would a democracy that's intergalactic actually work? That is what we're going to talk about today. Strategies to scale out governmental systems from a single country to a world, to a solar system, to a galaxy. Welcome to Just in Time Worlds with your host, Marie Mullaney. So first, we should talk about what politics is and why it's very different in space. Politics is basically the decision-making process of groups of people, and since no matter what fantastical world you're writing in, the audience you're writing for is human, your world should probably include some kind of politics. There's likely to be some sort of hierarchical pecking order and people who make decisions for the rest. We can easily imagine a kingdom or an empire or a democracy if it's within the bounds of a single world. After all, we have seen such things in our world, providing us with historical examples to draw on. But does the same apply in space? Well, yes and no. The problem is that because of the vastness of space and the massive amount of people, be they human or alien, the normal models of government need some adjustment. I mean, a Senate sounds like a nice idea when you can limit it to 100 people. But having 100 people make decisions for a galaxy's worth of planets with different species populating them is a very different matter. I've already done a video on the basic forms of government and how to choose the right one for your culture, which you can check out in the information card. But to expand these governmental types to space requires some additional strategies. So, without further ado, let's plunge into the meat of the matter with the first strategy for expanding your government: embrace political complexity. When I'm talking about political complexity, I mean that your political system needs different factions, and those factions need competing goals. Now, this one also applies to straight fantasy world building. Even if you're creating an imperial court or the court of a simple kingdom, there should be different factions in this court and they should have competing agendas. In space, this should scale up exponentially. Each planet, after all, has its own resources, potentially its own species, definitely its own threats. And it should have an agenda related to its concerns. That agenda might or might not align with the other planets within the same interplanetary government. And this applies even more if you have a galaxy-wide government. A great example of this embrace of political complexity is in The Expanse. This world offers us a complex and nuanced political landscape. Earth, Mars, and the Belt all have unique political agendas, and that's not even counting the Outer Planets Alliance, the OPA, which is a loose political confederation of colonies scattered across the asteroid belts and the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. The Belters are often at odds with the inner planets due to the latter's exploitation of the Belt's resources, and they desire independence from Earth. And that sets up a great source of conflict as the power struggles between Earth, Mars, and the Belt unfolds, with the OPA representing a wild card on the belt's side. So what is the key takeaway here? When you're building multi-planetary governments, you need to add complexity to that government in the shape of factions. You need to add those different agendas from the different factions, the different planets, even the different sectors. This will add both depth and realism to your government, and that will enhance your narrative. And if you're wondering if you should do this at a planetary level or at the sector level, or how you should structure these agendas, I did do a video about mapping space and creating those geopolitical units, which you can check out in the information card. And if you've enjoyed this conversation about political complexity and its importance, hit the thumbs up button, and let's talk about strategy 2. Embrace diversity. I know, saying embrace diversity makes me sound like the HR manager at some massive corporate firm. But the thing is, if you're going to be building a multi-planetary system, even if this is a colonization setup like the Expanse, the people who leave the home planet will culturally diversify by light years from the origin culture. Their whole environment changes, their cultural setup changes, their concerns change, their threats change. And this is even more dramatic in the case where you have species that have evolved on different planets. These species would have very little in common with each other culturally, and you need to show that in your politics and in your story. A great example of this remains Star Trek, that does a really good job of portraying a wide variety of cultures and political structures within its interstellar setting. You have everything from the Klingon warrior culture to the Vulcan logic and meritocratic dominated culture. And each of those cultures are rich and diverse. And in those differences lie the conflict the story needs to fuel its politics. So, create diverse cultures and let that diversity clash and feed your agendas, which in turn stokes the furnace of your politics. And this will feed your story and create a much more believable intergalactic political system. And if you like getting told to embrace diversity, hit that thumbs up button. And let's talk about strategy 3, developing a realistic economic system. Economics really deserves its own video, and I will talk more in depth about space economics in a future video because of the complexities that comes with vastness and resources and so on. But economics is also part of politics. So we'll do a little bit of it here. Now, of course, you do need an economic model of some kind for a given planet and probably for your intergalactic model. And if you want my thoughts on economic models in general and how to implement them in world building, check out the information card. It was actually one of the first videos I made on this channel, and I think it still stands up. Let me know what you think. But the thing about space economics is you have to consider what really creates value. Space has the potential to break resource scarcity completely, and the technology of space has the potential to break the value of labor in goods by automating, well, everything. So what then makes goods have value? If the value doesn't come from the labor and it doesn't come from the resources, where does the value come from? I think one potential source of value for goods in a space fantasy world comes from how far it needs to travel and how difficult it is for that travel to take place. And for a very well thought out example of this, let's turn to Frank Herbert's Dune with the Chome Company. Chome Company? Comb Company? Chome Company? I've heard it pronounced every different way you can imagine. Let me know how you think it should be pronounced. Is it comb or chome? Let me know in the comments. Frank Herbert's Dune with the Chome Company and the Spacers Guild. The central conflict of Dune is, of course, driven by the spice and its potential shortage, which really drives the economics of the empire. The spice must flow because it is the only thing that is really valuable in the society. It can move all other goods. And that, of course, is the reason the Spacer Guild is so powerful. They can prevent the movement of resources, goods, and people, and that gives them an outsized influence despite being an economic rather than governmental entity. So, when you're setting up your economic system in your multi-planetary government, think about where value in your setting comes from and how that value of goods is impacted by travel. If your travel is what adds goods, then it is a good question to ask who controls that travel, because those people will have a massive impact on the politics of your world. And if you want some ideas of how to set up travel in space, check out my video on breaking the faster than light barrier. And now, let's turn to power dynamics and conflict as our fourth strategy. One of the reasons why I really love Babylon 5 is because it shows the shifting dynamics and power struggles between different factions in the universe. You have Earth Alliance, which over the course of the series becomes more and more hardline and more anti-alien. You have the Psi Corps, who are driving their own agenda and can be a threat or an ally, depending on how well their agenda aligns with our main protagonist's agenda at any given moment. You have the Mars colony that is struggling from independence from the more and more hardline Earth Alliance. And all of that is without all the alien factions. The Minbari have 3 factions, and you see the shifting power between those 3 factions as the story unfolds, with the warrior caste and the priest caste especially jockeying for power. And then there is the interspecies conflict between the Centauri and the Narn, which escalates into war, and we still haven't talked about the League of Non-Aligned Worlds. Babylon 5 really focuses on those conflicts, and they allow those conflicts to drive much of the story. Now, that being said, there is a massive pitfall here, and I'm going to call it the Game of Thrones pitfall. Please note, I am not talking about whatever Martin ends up writing. At this point, I don't know what, if anything, we'll get from his pen. I'm talking about the show. And this is the pitfall. If you write so much politics and conflict that the external threat that you're using exits your core conflict, you are going to end up with a disappointed audience. I'm sorry, but why? Why? Why did the Night King just die? I can't even. It's okay. It's okay. I'm fine. Moving on. The point is, Babylon 5 didn't do this. They had all of the conflicts, the shift of alliances, the civil and external war, people making deals with the bad guys. All of that was in Babylon 5. But they still had the protagonists focus on the bad guys, and overcoming the bad guys was still a core part of the series. And that was what made it great. So absolutely in your story, build in the power struggles. But unless you are telling a story of only the power struggles between normal people and you don't have a big bad, you must remember that your protagonists, at least some of them, still need to focus on the big bad. Otherwise, you're going to be left with disappointed readers. What do you think? Is Martin ever going to finish A Song of Ice and Fire? Let me know in the comments. And let's move on to strategy 5, showing political evolution. You know, I don't often give Star Wars credit for presenting good interplanetary politics because mostly they don't. But in this case, I will give Star Wars credit. In the 9 movies of Star Wars, we had the intergalactic government change from a federated republic style of government to an imperial government driven by the will and power of one man to a factionalized semi-republic with pockets of imperial-focused planets within the same galaxy. And that is actually great. One of the things that fundamentally annoys me about the fantasy genre is how static governments are. Even these quests to save the world, you might save the world from whichever big bad threat there is, but the systems that allow that big bad threat to arise or to remain, those systems stay in place like a bad smell. No one ever thinks to agitate for trying something new, for actually having a revolution. It's like nothing changes about the political fabric of the world. The kingdoms are still kingdoms, the empires are still empires, the democracies are still democracies. Maybe, if you're lucky, the empire is overthrown and replaced with the kingdoms. Because, the system of nobility is actually fine, everyone likes it. It's just so static. Our world had priest kings in the Bronze Age. We had Mediterranean democracies like Athens, the Roman Republic, and Carthage, which had an oligarchic form of democracy. And then the Roman Republic fell, and we had the Roman Empire, and we had a phase of kingdoms and ruling through heritage. Then we had the Age of Revolution, and during the Age of Revolution, everything changed, and we went for democracies again. And that was just a high level of Europe's political system changes. There have been theocracies, democracies, kingdoms, empires, councils of elders, governments based on luck, everything you can think of. Government systems should change in your fantasy world, and in your space fantasy world, even more so. Yeah, maybe the overarching intergalactic government wouldn't change often. But in a million worlds, how many revolutions do you think are happening per second? So, don't get trapped in a static political system. Allow your political system to change and evolve. Allow fundamental political change to happen. Allow laws to be tweaked and systemic adjustments to be made. It is both realistic and worth it to build a great political environment. And that is how you expand governments from the world to the stars. Embrace political complexity. Celebrate diversity. Develop realistic economies. Focus on those power struggles. And show political evolution of your systems. What do you think? Are those strategies enough? Are there any that I missed? Let me know in the comments below. This episode was brought to you by my science fantasy series, Skies of Destiny. If you'd like to support the channel and read a cool coming-of-age story set in the far future, there is a link to the first book, Magic Fall, down below. However, please don't feel pressured to support the channel financially. Another great way that you can support me is by simply watching another video. Since you like this video, maybe check out my video on reform versus revolution. Or you could trust the algorithm's recommendation and click on the video it's showing to you right now. And I will see you soon for another episode of Just-in-Time World Building, where we build what we need when we need it.